Mikuro Weme, we are His Royal Majesty Axosu Agelogbagan, Agbovi I, the founder and monarch of the only Maroon monarchy in America, in the West, maybe in the world, Ganlodo. And that is the name of the monarchy. Mi Kudo Bada means we greet you for the evening. Mi Kudo Weme, Foriji me. That means forgive us in Yoruba. We're making this short video to address a few topics, all related. It's kind of killing a few birds with one stone. So we've been contemplating the idea of, the concept of Aje in relation to family development and nation building. Aje is the innate power, spiritual, intuitive, mental, of African women. Only they have it. It is one reason why women, when they get initiated to Ifa, they do not have to go through the Odu, or receiving Odu or seeing Odu process. But also we want to address, because of the popularity of the Dora Milaje, not sure if we're pronouncing that correctly, of the from Black Panther, that has increased not only interest in Dahomean and we should say Dahomean and its culture and what those women represented on Black Panther. Commonly called, when Europeans write about them, the Dahomean Amazons, the women warriors. They were more properly called Mino, which simply means our mother. There are other names that's a little bit more esoteric, and we'll reserve sharing that with those people that get in touch with us. Because now you see Mino online. So, and this goes along the line of some things we've talked about over the years in general, about having the correct perception of our history. The only way a wound can properly heal is it has to be addressed as a wound. You cannot say, I do not have a wound, and allow infection and whatnot to build up in it. You know, we're talking about a real wound, instead of addressing it. You can't think your arm is going to heal if you break it. If you do not first acknowledge that you have a broken arm, and then you take the steps to set the arm so that it may heal over a 4 to 6 week period. Africans, even many of us in the culture, many of our people in the culture are claiming to be part of various aspects of African culture, like Isheshe, the Bosonfie tradition of the Akan, and Vodun, are still in denial about many facts of our history. And that denial is equal to having a broken arm, never getting it set, and then your arm is, for the rest of your life, disfigured and does not have the full proper use that it's supposed to have. So, dealing with the concept of Aje and nation building is also in line with getting our history right, so we could heal and keep going. So, the way we look at Aje, the power, the intuitive power of women, is that thing that they have innately that get things done effectively, efficiently, and with the less cost. While they're doing their thing, the nation is being built. The family development is proper. It is a power, Many women have the IJ to the level that they can think about a thing and it happens, or they look at somebody and make them stumble, or or put a curse on them. Not saying that there are not men that have spiritual abilities and power, but this is a particular power specific to our African women. When used properly, it is wonderful. However, in the West, and even those that are not in the West but are westernized, that means many people in Africa, this intuitive power is suppressed. And often when women try to utilize it or express it, then they're referred to as all kind of negative nomenclatures, witches and stuff like that, in a negative sense. So it is our duty in African tradition to develop the power of IJ. This whole video is not about IJ, but we want to give you an overview of IJ to show you how IJ can be used powerfully and positively, and also negatively. Because IJ can also be used to manifest the physical. We were talking about nation building, right? So it was when, for instance, to give you an example, Oyo, the Yoruba monarchy of Oyo, that's often called Oyo Empire, had a yoke on Dahomey. Even though Dahomey was considered this great power, they had to pay tribute from about 1727 up until about 1825, almost 100 years, to Oyo. They were almost like a vassal of Oyo. And then came along the Mino, right? And the Mino, they are, as you know, the famed Dahomean Amazons. African people, you should never refer to your women warriors as Amazon. That does not refer to a tall woman or courageous woman. The word Amazon is Greek. It means one-breasted. It means, literally that. And that came about when they were, when they decided to become Amazon. Most of the time they were actually captured by other dissexual or homosexual women to be in the service of the Amazonian cause, which was often to really eliminate men, honestly. Yovo men. And so they would cut off usually their right breast, because there's a particular kind of bow and arrow they used that went up against the chest. So they didn't care nothing about, anything dealing with the feminine on that level, and they cut their breasts off. So when you're referring to your women as Amazons, that's what you're saying. So the Mino came along, and they were there before, but Gezo, the Dahomean king, from 1818 to 1858, he stepped up the institution of the Mino. But with the stepping up of the institute, so let's back up a little bit. So stepping that up, they threw off Oyo, threw off the yoke of Oyo. Now, we're not saying that the women were the only reason that they were able to throw that yoke off, but they were a big part of it. Part of it because of the spiritual prowess combined with their physical prowess, the IJ that they had within them, which was the spiritual prowess, manifesting into the physical. So, with the throwing off of the yoke of Oyo and the increase of the Mino, also came the increase of their use as captive hunters, so-called slave hunters, slave raiders, whatnot. Once again, we've always said A slave is accepting of its position of lack of freedom. A captive is one who at any given moment is trying to get away from that position. Our ancestors, for the most part, were captives. They were not slaves. So, captive Africans were sold, not slaves. Captive Africans were on plantations in the Americas and England and whatnot, and they were not slaves. So, now that same power, IJ power, that had been used to create and nation build before from the Mino, now became primarily to destroy, to capture other Africans, march them to Gledwe, which is the original name of Ouida, and which was a major port for our ancestors being sold into captivity. In one of the most famous cases that's documented, Cudjo Lewis, who passed away in 1935 in Mobile, Alabama, where we are from, by the way. He was the last survivor of the captive ship, so-called slave ship, named the Clotilda, that brought 129 Africans, started off with 129 Africans from the port of Ouida, and Ouida is in southern Benin, to Mobile, Alabama. And there's another long story behind that, but we just want to give that historical background. Cudjo Lewis, whose real name was Cudjo Kazula, gives an account of his captivity and who did it. And he describes these quote-unquote tall women that came, roughed him up, his family, took them all into captivity, and marched them down to the coast of Ouida. This is none other than the Mino. They were the only women group in that area like that. And this happened in many cases. That's just the documented, one of the documented cases. So we're talking about now the Mino being using their IJ in the negative. So with that concept of IJ, and these conversations I had often with in the New African community, when the women are taught properly how to use that power, then it, as they say, a nation can rise no higher than the condition of its woman. That condition should also reflect cultural and spiritual. When it is used negative, we get things like women keeping their children away from the father simply because they don't like the father, or he did something for them to break up, like mess around or something like that. It's not that he's violent or doing crazy stuff. They're just keeping away. So that's just one of the worst and most concerning examples of using the power of IJ in a negative way. Similar to how the Mino chose to use their power because they had much power in the court. They weren't slaves. They were not captives. They were not. So, now, we want to correct this major misinformation out here. One of the things is they say that the Africans that were selling Africans into captivity did not know what they were doing. They say that they sold prisoners of war, and they sold prisoners of war to Europeans as if they would sell them to other Africans. Where do we want to start first on this absolute misinformation? They definitely knew what they were doing. Let's take the case of Dahomean. We could take southern Nigeria also, and we can go over to the so-called slave houses over there in Ghana. There was a position, a high-ranking chieftaincy called Yovogan amongst the Dahomean people. Yovogan means chief of the Yovo. Yovo in this particular case were the Europeans. Yovo is basically any non-African, but in this case it directly translates chief of the Europeans, but actually this person was chief of the dealings with Europeans. And the Europeans, as you know, their business over there was African captives. So the Yovogan was the negotiator. So when you look at that, this is a business, this is an institution that the Dahomey people have created to aid and abet their lust for European trinkets. They knew what they were doing. They knew chattel enslavement was happening because they had a ritual on the beach of Ouida. Before you would get into those canoes, there were canoes that would take people out to the ship. The ship had to sit out 1.5 miles to 2 miles into the water because the waters were too shallow for a ship to come in that close. So who you think the canoes belonged to and who paddled them to the European boats? Other Africans, right? Under the direction of the Yovogan, various chiefs, and of course all the way to the top of the Axosu, or the king of Dahomey.